added into Western Desert Campaign especially, but you can find some others in like Duel of the Sun. The uneven ground is going to provide odd spaces where vehicles can actually find some sunken areas where they can present themselves as hull down without any prepared positions being required. So let's head to the classroom and see just how we can incorporate these rules into our bolt action games. All right, welcome back to the classroom. We've got weather effects today to cover, and we're also going to talk about some actual desert combat special rules. There's, relatively speaking, a little less to cover. Hopefully get through this relatively quick. We'll go on to yet another field exercise that'll kind of cover some of these things. All right, first, now weather effect was in both books. Now Fog of War is a rule that was in the Duel in the Sun book. It's not in the current one, but I'm going to cover it as well because they're both desert related. So let's start with the weather effects. Now, at the start of every scenario, before you set up, you can roll a d6 and determine the type of weather that you're going to be facing. Now, this can be mission specific. It might be in the scenario itself, or again, you might just play this as, agree with your opponent to do this. All right, so on a 1 or 2, something's brewing is on the horizon. No immediate effect, but at the end of each game turn, the player must roll a d6 plus 1 and refer on the table. So you get to re-roll it, and it's until some event takes place. And the first event is 3 to 4, a d-roll of 3 or 4. It's called haze. Now haze is where a temperature causes an intense heat haze to blur the horizon. All weapons firing a distance greater than 12 inches count as firing at long range, regardless of their actual range. Additionally, when rolling on one of the barrage tables, a player must roll 2d6 and choose the lowest score as the result. Ouch. Does it come in or does it scatter? So you got to roll twice, and unfortunately, you have to choose the lowest score. So you roll 2d6, and if either of those are a 1, it scatters. That's not good. So you're going to scatter more often. That's a big effect, that haze, so you want to avoid it. Now, number 5 is a mirage. It's kind of as haze, but also any unit that fails an order test on double 4, 5, or 6, so not just double 6, but 8, where it's a 4 and a 4, or 10, where it's a 5 and a 5, or a foobar. All these are treated as a foobar because there's some confusion misinterpreting the mirage as it's assuming it's an enemy, and so you start shooting in that direction. Well, there's a friendly unit nearby, potentially. So again, you're being disoriented. You roll on the foobar table as if you rolled a 12. Key here is you have to fail the order test. So let's say you need an 8 because you got a pin. Your regular unit got a pin on it, and you roll an 8, which is double 4s. That would normally be a foobar, but since you pass that roll, it doesn't take effect. It's only if you fail it. So, failing on a 10 pair of 5s, failing on a pair of 6s, and failing on a pair of 4s. Now, the last one is a 6 called Sandstorm. This is a huge effect. Fierce winds start up. At the start of that game turn, when it happens, each infantry and artillery unit that does not have the majority of its models within terrain or is not dug in immediately gains D3 plus 1 pin markers. That sand is just going to force you down. It's going to force you to take cover. This represents disorienting and blasting effects of the sandstorm. In addition, while the sandstorm rages that turn, all units on the table are affected by the limited visibility rules, which is a night fighting kind of thing. So you have to roll to see how far you can see. At the end of each game turn where a sandstorm is in effect, one player rolls a d6, adding the game turn number as a modifier. On a 6+, the sandstorm dies down and has no further effect on the rest of the scenario. As soon as the sandstorm is triggered, the Desert Fighter's trait has no effect for the rest of the game. So 2 points per model you spent is wasted, because sand gets everywhere, confounding the best efforts to even the most well-prepared Desert Fighters. So they'll be all Desert Fighter units, whether they come with or you pay the upgrade. Think about that. All of those are immediately begin to be affected by the climate effects of forcing them to run, and when you run, forcing them to make a die roll to see if you potentially fail. So that's the weather table. Now let's go on to the desert combat special effects. Now the Duel in the Sun did not have that. So this is everything specific to this Western Desert book. The first one, we covered the Desert Fighters rule earlier. But now there's also a Desert Dwellers. It's kind of as Desert Fighters, but if the weather effects table is used, units with this trait, and this is an additional trait, ignore the effects of haze and mirage. If a sandstorm is rolled, however, the unit gains only the pin markers and still retains its Desert Fighters rule. Now, this trait is restricted to troops native to the region. So you can only get this if you're, according to this, if you're an Italian colonial troop or Italian Compagnia Sahariana infantry squads. Now, I would have to look up in Easy Army, but it doesn't look like this is an additional effect. I think this is a trait that, so essentially you buy either Desert Fighter or you buy Desert Dweller. And if you have one of these units that qualifies, you buy Desert Dweller and get the Desert Fighter, and then during the game you have less likelihood of that Desert Fighter going away with some of those adverse effects. So that's kind of we're not going to be able to see that one on because we don't have any Italian units to really take advantage of those. So you won't see Desert Dweller. You'll see Desert Fighter though. Now the last one is Going Down. Now Going Down is kind of a long list, but it's really relatively simple. Because of the undulation in the desert, there's a lot of places you can position your armored vehicle to gain a hull down just being out in the open. So what you'll do is you'll move into position, and if you're given an advance order only, that's the key, it has to be an advance order, and you move into open terrain or any terrain, you can use that order to enable the vehicle to go hull down. Now, you still have to make an order test, even if you didn't have any pins. You still have to make that order test to give it that order. If the test is passed, it makes the advance move without firing and is then hull down. So what you're doing, instead of focusing on shooting at something, you're focusing on maneuvering into a hull down position. From that point, you end up having modifiers. Well, let me back up. First, there's, depending on the type of terrain that's around there, undulating, flat, or rolling gives you some potential modifiers. So if the terrain is flat, you're -1 on the morale check. If it's undulating, it's nothing. If it's rolling, there's a lot of hills and stuff, it's +1 morale test. So unless specified with the scenario, all the open ground is considered flat, which is the -1 morale. Morale is also modified by -1 if an enemy unit is within 12 inches when the order test is made. So the scenario will specify anything other than flat. So always assume it's flat. So morale test -1, minus pins, to make the advance order to go into hull down. Now, once it's been passed, you mark the vehicle in some way and place a down order next to it. So that you know it's not just down. I mean, it's not down, but it's actually hull down. If the test has failed, though, the vehicle must reverse as usual, but it is not going to fire, and you don't roll in the foobar. So essentially, you make your advance. You're going to make your advance. You roll. If you fail, instead of moving it forward, you'll roll backward half your advance distance. Now, these are the following rules that apply to any hull down vehicle. They're -2 modifier to be hit, so think of them as being down or dug in. If the vehicle has a turret, only the turret-mounted weapons can fire. No hull-mounted weapons can fire. Turretless vehicles can choose to fire one weapon that can fire, though. So if you've got a Stug, for example, or an Italian self-propelled gun, all it's got is its hull-forward machine gun. It can choose to fire that one. You're assumed to have positioned yourself in such a way that that one gun can fire. And of course, any pinto mountain weapons can fire, and only weapons that can be fired from a hull down position, as from the turret or as I specified before, those are the only ones that you can use when you're being charged. So in reaction to a charge. Now the hull down status is lost immediately when a vehicle moves. But again, if you're in one position and you want to move to another position to go hull down, you have to do the advance order. You don't have to move and then do an advance order after. You can do it, move using that same advance order, move into a new hull down position, and again not fire that turn. So you're not going to lose too much. You're not going to lose 2 turns. You're just going to lose the one repositioning. We'll have to see how often that comes up in the game when we go into the field exercise. A vehicle finds its hull down position at the end. So if it's subject to an ambush fire during that move, it does not benefit from the hull down position yet. No. Now here's one situation where the ambush order is going to be affected by this. When you make that advance order, you don't have to actually move to go into position. You can just sit where you are if you like your spot and just assume you're going to hull down position if you make the morale test. The thing is, because that advance is assumed to be some kind of shuffling around to get into position, you are assumed to be moving, even though you may have moved 0 inches. So an ambush order can be sprung on you. So keep that in mind. Now, since the ambush order occurs before you've finished your move, you don't get advantage of the hull down yet. You take the shot, and then after the shot's resolved, then you go hull down. Now, of course, it is permissible to reverse a vehicle into a hull down position. It's like if you have a rear-mounted vehicle, so you can. Don't just think forward-pointing. Think rearward-pointing weapons as well. So that's the combat rules. So now next video we're gonna actually do a field exercise, and you'll see a few of these in use. So thanks for sticking around. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.